It is Sunday, the 17th of September. I'm in front of the Unitarian Church of Montreal, just about starting up my alternative spiritual practice of protesting against Unitarian Universalist injustices, abuses, and hypocrisy. And I can't help but notice that the Unitarian Church of Montreal's wayside pulpit is without anything in it, and one of the doors is wide open. Prior to this situation, I got a police supervisor band coming by here. Prior to this quite empty wayside pulpit, it had an empty and meaningless mission statement of the Unitarian Church of Montreal in it. It was quite funny because the wording of the mission statement was so vague that it was essentially meaningless. That it looked all nice and fluffy bunny on the surface, but if you put it this way, it was so open to interpretation that it could be interpreted in a very negative manner. It went something like this: our spiritual community welcomes, nurtures, inspires, challenges. I think there was one other thing in there, but those were definitely there. And then it went on to say, we take action in the world. So it doesn't say, what exactly the spiritual community known as the Congregation of the Unitarian Church of Montreal actually welcomes. It should be obvious that it's certainly theoretically possible for them to welcome some very unpleasant things, some things that are immoral and unethical and borderline criminal and actually criminal and, quite frankly, just plain evil. And in fact, I think I can say that to some extent the Unitarian Church of Montreal's congregation does exactly that. The same goes for inspires, and the same goes for nurtures. They definitely nurture some highly questionable behavior, quite frankly. So there's the police supervisor's van coming by again. So anyhow, let's see if they maybe want to have a little chat with me. Oh, it's Westmount. Okay, this is good. So it's the Westmount police station, Station 12. Normally, the Unitarian Church of Montreal is in the jurisdiction of Station 11. Now, there can be overlap of jurisdictions. For instance, if no Station 11 police are available for whatever reason, that they could send police from Station 12. But what's interesting is it's also possible that Station 11 police have finally realized, that everything I'm doing is, perfectly legal and that I have very good reasons to be protesting outside the Unitarian Church of Montreal. And the guys, I don't know what he's up to there, but anyhow, it's not impossible that Montreal Unitarians directly called Station 12 to have the Station 12 cops come by because basically Station 11 has just said, forget it, we're not coming unless we get an emergency call or something like that. So anyhow, the guy just came around, had a look, looked at my signs, looked at my chalk slogans, and left, which is as it should be as far as I'm concerned. As far as I'm concerned, everything I'm doing is perfectly legal. I have every right to write chalk slogans about Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse and Unitarian Universalist cover-up and denial of clergy abuse on the sidewalk during the course of my protest. I believe it's well within my Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guaranteed civil rights and liberties. Although the police have made an issue of it in the past, basically after several interventions with the police where they specifically, were saying that, well, at least at minimum they were questioning my right to write chalk slogans on the sidewalk. And I said, well, I'm quite sure I'm within my rights, and I've consulted various legal advisors and so on about it. And I said, maybe you should consult your own lawyers, because the police do have their own legal department. They have their own lawyers, and put it this way, since I told some SPVM cops, well, maybe you should just get your own legal advice about what I can or cannot do in terms of chalk slogans. I haven't had them questioning the chalk slogans anymore. So I suspect what happened is they did consult their lawyers, and their lawyer said, well, yeah, actually, he's within his rights. So we shall continue to circulate here, but it's very rare now for the police to intervene in any way. And I wouldn't call this little drive-by and have a look an intervention. An intervention is when they stop and have a discussion with me or arrest me, which has happened a few times in the past, or give me a ticket. Driving by and having a look is basically just reconnoitering things. So here we have David Rollert, the husband of the minister, coming out, and we'll just continue to circulate here. But it was interesting that it was a Station 12 supervisor van. So that's usually, a high-ranking officer within the station, let's say a lieutenant or something like that. Sergeant perhaps, but not like your sort of average run-of-the-mill police officer, but higher ranking police officer. So, and I should say that actually in the past, Westmount actually did have some jurisdiction here. The jurisdiction changed at some point, I don't know when, but my experience with the Westmount cops in general is that they were actually quite good. I had few problems with the cops from Station 12. It was more when the jurisdiction switched over to Station 11 that things started to get less than professional, shall we say. And I'm being very polite here when I say less than professional, because there was some pretty stupid stuff went on with the Station 11 cops until they finally figured out that it's best to just leave me alone to do what I have every right to do, and only intervene if they get some kind of emergency call, either from someone at the church or from me if I'm assaulted or have my picket sign stolen or something like that, which does occasionally happen.
A lot of time to lose, man.
Would you like your child to be molested by a minister, sir? Would you really? I am exposing some serious problems with this religious community. You should be concerned. I don't think you'd want a pedophile going after your... I didn't hear what you say, sir, but I think you should be a little bit less flippant about my protest against clergy abuse and so on. So this guy, basically says get a life kind of thing. You got lots of time to lose. Well, I don't mind spending an hour and a half or so most Sundays to protest against Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse and some other Unitarian Universalist injustices, abuses, and hypocrisies, especially when I know that Unitarian Universalists, go to extreme and foolish lengths to conceal what they had their lawyer describe as such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by certain Unitarian Universalist ministers in a couple of cease and desist demand letters he had me served with in June of 2012, which essentially wanted me to remove any and all blog posts that told the readily verifiable truth about such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by certain Unitarian Universalist ministers. So anyhow, we'll continue to circulate here. So I'm wondering if, David is looking at his phone, wondering if he's waiting for the police to go, because if he is, he's going to wait a long time. They showed up and left before he came out of the church. It's not impossible that David Rowland is out here because he wants to have a little discussion with the police about my protest. Well, all I can say is if that's the case, he's going to be disappointed because they already drove by and had a look and went on their way.
Are you religious?
You could say so. Are you?
Well, where'd you go to church?
I used to go to this church until...
oh, that's too bad.
Yeah.
That's too bad. So now you don't have any church.
I don't need one.
Okay.
I especially don't need a church that covers up and hides pedophilia and rape and that kind of stuff.
Well, you could go to the Catholic church if you want to do this.
Well, they're actually, you know what? They're actually more open about it these days than the Unitarians are. The Unitarians are the ones that are going to extreme and foolish lengths to hide pedophilia and rape committed by their ministers these days. But yeah, thanks for mentioning the Catholic Church. Yeah, typical Unitarian bigotry and prejudice. I mean, yes, they have a problem, but so does pretty much every other religious community, including the Unitarian Church. So, of course, someone tries to deflect my protest by, saying I could go to the Catholic Church, basically talking about the well-known sexual abuse that has happened in Catholic churches. But here's the interesting thing is that sexual abuse is much more known than what goes on in the Unitarian Church. And while the Catholic Church has certainly tried to conceal it and may still be trying to conceal it to some extent, the fact of the matter is that Unitarian Universalists are in almost complete psychological denial of any sexual abuse of children in their religious community, and they're still trying very hard to keep it as secret as they possibly can, trying to get rid of any evidence of it that's available online and so on, intimidating me with threats of being charged with the criminal act of blasphemous libel for blogging about Unitarian Universalists who were tried, convicted of the sexual abuse of children. Indeed, the forcible rape and even unnatural rape of children. So, just a typical dismissive attitude that one gets from Unitarians when you protest about their clergy abuse problem. So, and of course their clergy abuse problem is not limited to sexual abuse of children or sexual abuse of adults, sexual exploitation, and so on. There are non-sexual forms of clergy abuse. For instance, I'd say the false blasphemous libel accusation against me is a form of non-sexual abuse of power, although it's clearly intended to hide clergy sexual misconduct of the worst kind. But the act of falsely accusing me of the criminal act of blasphemous libel in an effort to conceal pedophilia and rape is a non-sexual abuse of power on the part of Reverend Dr. Peter Morales and other top-level leadership of the Unitarian Universalist Association. So yes, definitely quite egregious clergy abuse of a non-sexual kind. And then of course there's verbal and psychological abuse, there's intolerance and bigotry, and so on and so forth. There's financial shenanigans that go on at times, ministers and even the institution as a whole engaging in highly questionable financial things. That can be reasonably described as clergy abuse, especially when it has a abusive effect on somebody, as it sometimes definitely does. So anyhow, we'll just continue to circulate here and see how things go today. It's quite a warm day. You can hear the cicadas going there. And prior to starting up the video, I laid down a few chalk slogans. I didn't have the camera running when I was writing the slogans because that's sort of extra boring kind of thing. Although sometimes it's a mistake because I occasionally do have somebody who asks a question or something while I'm writing the chalk slogans, and I can't always turn the camera on to record what's being said. I actually had something like that happen on Friday when I was observing Purple Friday, which is a day that a British victim of childhood sex abuse started to call attention to sexual abuse of children and related issues. So this woman came by as I was writing a chalk slogan and was asking me questions, and I was answering them and so on, and it was actually quite a good little conversation we had, but unfortunately it was not recorded for posterity. But let's just say she fully understood what the issues were and encouraged me. Okay, so expose you clergy abuse, that's pretty straightforward. We'll come back and have a look at the other ones here. Let's just zoom out a bit. I think maybe I was zoomed in a little. So exposing Unitarian child sex abuse, aka hashtag CSA. CSA being the acronym for child sex abuse. It's also conveniently is the acronym for clergy sex abuse as well. The two go together when Unitarian and Universalist clergy engage in sexual abuse of children. So that acronym covers two things that overlap. Anyhow, those slogans, some of them are kind of left over from my Purple Friday protest, and since there were vestiges of the slogan